Hey, look, keeping this eye closed here. This seems to be putting me even still at an advantage over the common people primate of this epoch. The Homo communia, I mean, they can't see reality with both their eyes. Doesn't make a difference if I block one of mine. Anyways, here's Star Trek, The Next Generation from the 90s, helping me follow up with two topics I talked about recently. Episode 7, 8, I believe. So, season 7, episode 8, I believe. Um, you know how I talked about in the past how our brain seems to be capable of a collective consciousness or a global brain? Or a unimind, or an expanded collective unconscious, or whatever other ways you want to say, and, that would be an evolutionary attempt the Earth would be doing when at some point before we came or around the time we were coming around is things were pretty going pretty good with the biosphere, except that the plan of Earth to become a little bit more aware or conscious backfired because we failed it. We failed our creator, and continue to. But the way that I was talking about signs about a global brain possibility is a little bit what that episode reminds me of. Although it's not specifically about that, it's about kind of partial or temporary telepathy. But it reminded me that it is possible for our brain to have more than one consciousness existing in it. And again, I was saying before, I'm not talking about different personalities. I'm talking about entities, different entities existing in the same brain. It is wired for that possibility, and there are ways that we can actually manifest this, through, science and, meditative practices that we could split or create or learn how to form some. And that'd be one of the ways that the onset of a global brain would be possible. I mean, if you guys don't want to do any of the hard work, then you'd have to do easy work. And that's what your species seems to always want to do, the path of least resistance. Except that easy work for this global brain is actually way too hard for most of you. I know I've been living this way, and it's the way of complete, or at least as much as I can. I mean, I can't say I'm 100% transparency, but it would appear to be compared to the norm. And it's not like I'm not trying to reach 100%. It's just it's a hard thing to evaluate for. I'm pretty sure I'm still getting better at it. But transparency is a way, like, not wear a mask, not hide things, not compete, not keep things private that don't need to be private. Like really an expansion of the concept of transparency everywhere on the planet for our species. That would be a required thing, not just working on how can more than one consciousness exist in the wiring of our brain, which is possible. Speaking of your species not wanting to solve issues unless they're easy, and therefore the Anthropocene, and therefore the planet might have tried, or evolution, or the concept of the biosphere's interconnected kind of cybernetics might have been heading that way. It wasn't necessarily a conscious choice to develop a global brain, maybe because it was starting to sense itself and it felt alone. And of course, by merging everyone into a global brain where we're all connected, it would both solve the ability to not feel so alone as isolates. We're all isolates, but it would also have been the capability to collaborate at levels that our human chauvinism makes us think we can already collaborate. And it would have been able to, not destroy the biosphere or set it back. And I would say possibly billions, not just millions of years to where it was before. Like, for example, with a stable atmosphere, with oxygen for land mammals like us, for example. And a balance of more than just what is good for us, but what is good for the entire stability of the global ecosystems. Now, and we are capable of doing this, devolving billions of years. That's the power we have, the power to destroy life. We are nowhere near the ability to, help life evolve. As much as we think we're doing that or we have those abilities, we are the opposite on steroids. I've been saying that a lot, steroids lately, I guess. Um, so, for example, if we had developed a global brain, the ability to collaborate as little functioning parts, and I'm not saying we would have become less intelligent, like we would say, like a bee colony or ant hill or termites or whatever, they can create wonderful things, but not through a collective ability like that. But they're not intelligent in all ways we would need for us to, let's say, be widespread around the planet and not collapse the biosphere, because that's the first step before we go out there. We need to know how not to collapse a biosphere, and guess what? One that we evolved from shouldn't be that hard. Except that if we would have succeeded that, then, and we need a global brain to do that, but the intellectual laziness we have now is impossible. No way, again, that's possible for the future of our own species and the biosphere. I don't even think, if we were put aside, that any other species at this point, with the damage we've already been set on course for from our own species, is allow another species to have a chance to try this again. So, in a way, if life on this planet comes to an end or failed or might have been unique and nowhere else in the world, I mean, we are the cosmic villains. I mean, you want to think Thanos is, but man, come on. Thanos wanted to do it on a universal scale quickly. Like, for example, half of life gone with no suffering except for the loss felt by others, was cruel in the sense that not every planet in the Marvel 616 storyline may have required this. So that was what was cruel about Thanos. Not that he was, not altruistic towards life, but he was lazy in a way that he didn't want to spend more time being selective about it, about which planet. And you would think, again, we don't get the concept of omniscient or omnipotent, because, I mean, technically he would have been able to, with his gauntlet, except we don't get these concepts, mortality, eternity, we don't get these very well as a failed species, but he would have been able to, with his power, to actually not kill half of life on planets that were stable, that would have had a smarter or more responsible, more sentient or sapient species in us, even if they were not spacefaring, those species. Anyways, going back to the topic, that if we would have been able to, and I said how a collective mind would have made the concept of loneliness, but it's more aloneness, a lot less part of the concept of miseries or hardships that self-aware creatures would have to suffer, but it would also be that we would now have been able to collaborate to become spacefaring species that would have set the seeds of Gaia, let's call it, on other planets, and a little bit like the Isaac Asimov storyline, would have been able to create Galaxia. Now, if you look at the episode of Star Trek that is 7-9, and the end, and it's a little bit like what's happening today with, let's say, the oil industry, is this episode they're discovering warp drive is harmful. And even there, at that time, you get the fake hope, even though the data's there that the harm's already been done to, the space-time continuum with warp drive, used too much in too many ways by too many species in these areas. These high-energy lifestyle species has collapsed, therefore destroyed not just a planet, but the ability for space-time to be, safe and stable, so that life can continue to evolve. You can see in Star Trek, the way that episode ends, Season 7, Episode 9, that it's, again, even the scientists believe in the miracles, that they don't believe the data even when they get it, that, no, we've already done a lot of harm. You can't just reduce, let's say, warp use, warp engine use or oil industries by 50%, because there's still time, because already the data shows there's not still time, at least for those other species that we were, mingling with in that episode, and most certainly not for anybody else when we are not ready to make a big enough change when we receive the data. So, even scientists can be trusted to care about others. And you can't tell this from Star Trek. It's still great because they say we have enough time to fix this when the data shows no, not in this sector of space anyways. And the other thing is you can tell by the response that they don't care about others, that just cutting by half, blah, blah. And it's the same thing with protests and things like that. There's a video I just watched from New Zealand channel. I can't remember what it's called yet because I've only watched a few videos. And they interviewed a lot in the UK protesters, and you can tell that nobody, again, is having the right conversation. That when a species has failed, like we have, is we have to... we have to minimize our numbers. Nobody's talking about this. And I don't mean killing. I mean less births. And there's a difference. And when you guys can't see the difference, then history creates Thanosos or other, modern day villains. Okay? And there's so few elites that own so much now that even if the norm wants to fix things because the elites aren't doing it, it would work. Because if the norm have significantly less kids, even if the elites have 10 kids each, it's still going to solve the overpopulation of our species and the way we live. So again, and of course, the elites will no longer be elites once it's their own kids that have to do the work to push them up instead of ours. There's a lot of ways that you guys, if you really cared, you'd be having these conversations. And again, I said Greta is still also not talking about this. And the fact that nobody wants to, it's pathetic evidence, again, that everybody is looking for solutions that are easy when there isn't any, and therefore the Anthropocene will keep accelerating. And that is such a pathetic thing for me to share DNA with this species called the Homo communia about. And to have this awareness, look, I have this awareness that I live a time in history when all the tipping points, all the types of tipping points, including your social tipping points to save yourselves, have been passed. And yet I have sapience and sentience where I'm willing to be very poor and very unpopular so that future generations of all life forms could have a bit of a chance to reboot something I can't even imagine. Okay, and it's not going to be a global brain. I don't think it'll be possible anyways. So, not with the way we will devolve life on this planet, and we have already set that course. It can be changed, but we seem to be, speeding it up. Now, speeding it up by elites that have kids and grandkids, again, I'm saying take their kids away. I mean, the data and evidence is there. They should stop having kids. And they say, Martin, you just said they should have kids. No, I said, don't worry if they have 10 kids each. There's so few of them now. There's such a divide. And again, their power will be lost by you not having kids and you learning things that you haven't been learning as these powerful brains that should be lifelong learners because you've been busy working jobs and industries that push these elites up. This is common sense. I mean, it's basic sequence of logic, and you don't need a PhD in anything to figure this out. You just need to have sapience and sentience. So I'm still in search of the elusive Homo sapien who can agree with me on, system science stuff.